Right now, there's a good chance one of these 5 GPS trackers is clipped to your kid's backpack, bolted under your car's dashboard, or sitting in your pocket disguised as a keychain. 5 tracking devices that federal cybersecurity investigators, independent security researchers, and real court filings have all confirmed can be remotely hijacked, silently listened through, or quietly sold off to strangers, without the person wearing one ever finding out. Here's what makes this one hit differently than the last 2 videos. A hacked streaming box embarrasses you. A tracking TV annoys you. A hacked GPS tracker can tell a stranger exactly where your child is standing right now in real time. This isn't a data point sitting in a spreadsheet somewhere. It's a location, a live one. And that's really the thread connecting every single entry on this list. Every device we're about to cover was purchased for the same basic reason. Someone wanted to feel a little safer about a person or a vehicle they cared about. That's what makes the failures on this list land differently than a leaky streaming app or a nosy television. These aren't devices that quietly annoyed their owners. Several of them, according to the researchers and court filings behind this video, did close to the opposite of their entire purpose. Before we get into it, if this is useful to you, hit that like button and subscribe if you're new here, because I break down exactly this kind of thing every single week. The stuff hiding in devices you bought specifically to feel safer. We're counting down 5 tracking devices by name, backed by federal advisories, independent research, and active lawsuits. And stick around to the end, because after the 5, I'm giving you 2 devices we'd actually trust with this exact job. Let's start with number 5. At number 5, a family of trackers built by a Chinese manufacturer called Shenzhen i365 Tech, sold under dozens of different brand names, so you've likely seen this exact device without ever hearing this company's name. The bait is the promise stitched into the marketing on almost every listing. Clip this onto your child, your aging parent, or your dog's collar, and always know exactly where they are. Small, cheap, usually under $50, and sold constantly on Amazon and similar marketplaces. Here's the mechanic. Security researchers at Avast analyzed the T8 Mini and 29 related models and found that every single one shipped with the exact same default password. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not a starting suggestion. The actual password left unchanged on over 600,000 active devices because nothing in the setup process ever forced an owner to pick something different. The tell is what that password unlocks. Location data traveled from the device to the cloud, completely unencrypted in plain text, readable by anyone intercepting it. Worse, a design flaw let an attacker remotely access the device's built-in microphone, meaning a stranger could listen in on whatever was happening around the child or senior wearing it, live, without triggering any alert on the device itself. The cost here isn't hypothetical. Avast's senior researcher Martin Hron tried repeatedly to warn the manufacturer before going public and was met with total silence, which is exactly why the firm issued a public safety warning instead, telling parents outright to stop using these devices. When a cybersecurity company skips its usual private disclosure process and goes straight to a public warning, that's the researcher equivalent of pulling a fire alarm. What makes this one worth sitting with for a second longer is what it means in practice. A device marketed entirely around the word safety was capable of doing the exact opposite of its own promise, turning a tool meant to protect a child into a tool that could expose exactly where that child is standing and let a stranger listen while they figure out what to do about it. You won't believe what's coming up next, because this one isn't clipped to a backpack. It's bolted into a vehicle, and it can do more than just track it. Number 4. The Mikotis MV700, a GPS tracker built for vehicles popular with fleet operators and, according to the manufacturer's own website, in use across 420,000 customers, including government, military, and law enforcement agencies. The bait is reliability at scale. This isn't a random Amazon impulse buy. It's a tracker businesses and institutions chose specifically because it promised dependable, professional-grade vehicle monitoring. Here's the mechanic, flagged by the cybersecurity firm BitSight, and confirmed by a formal CISA advisory in 2022. The MV700 7D shipped with a hard-coded master password baked into the device itself, plus the ability to accept commands sent by unauthenticated text message. Someone who found that master password, which researchers were able to identify, could remotely track any MV720's exact location, or, because the device is wired directly into the vehicle, send a command that cuts off the fuel supply entirely. The tell is the sheer range of what that access enabled. This wasn't a narrow data leak. Researchers demonstrated the ability to remotely disable a vehicle mid-operation, a capability with obvious implications for anyone using this device on an emergency vehicle, a commercial fleet, or a family car. The cost is that for a real stretch of time, none of this had a fix. CISA's original 2022 advisory stated plainly that Makaitis had not provided any patch, and BitSight's recommendation at the time was to stop using the device entirely, because there was no known workaround. To be fair to the full record, CISA later published a follow-up advisory confirming Makaitis eventually did roll out a fix, an update to its web tracking platform, plus updated Android and iOS apps. But that fix only arrived after the vulnerabilities, including the ability to remotely cut a moving vehicle's fuel supply, had already been publicly documented and left unpatched for an unknown length of time. Picture what that actually means for the government and law enforcement fleets the manufacturer advertises as customers. A vulnerability sitting in a device trusted to track official vehicles, with a documented method for a stranger to remotely cut power to the fuel pump, went unpatched for long enough to become a formal federal advisory before a fix ever showed up. This isn't a device quietly sitting in a handful of personal cars. Researchers pointed specifically to its use across aerospace, energy, and shipping industries, meaning the blast radius of this flaw stretched well beyond any single owner who bought it for their own vehicle. I'm sure you've seen a version of this next one advertised as an upgrade, because the company behind it wanted you to believe the exact same flaw had finally been fixed. Wait before we continue. Right now, while you are watching this, someone might be tracking every website you visit, every search you run, and every message you send. Your internet provider. Your router. That coffee shop Wi-Fi from last Tuesday, all of it logged. All of it for sale. NordVPN fixes that. One app encrypts your connection, masks your IP, and now includes a built-in antivirus that blocks malware and phishing in real time. Over 9,500 servers, up to 10 devices, dark web monitor included. Check the link in the description and get 76% off right now plus 3 months free. Now back to the video. At number 3, CinoTrack, another vehicle tracking platform, and this is the freshest entry on the entire list. The advisory covering this device is only about a year old. The bait is scale and trust. CinoTrack advertises more than 6 million of its trackers installed in vehicles worldwide, a number that alone makes it one of the most widely deployed vehicle tracking brands on the planet. Here's the mechanic. In June 2025, CISA issued an advisory based on research from an independent security researcher detailing 2 vulnerabilities in the CinoTrack platform. Every device uses a username that's simply the identifier printed directly on the physical unit, paired with a default password that's identical across the entire product line and never enforced to change during setup. Anyone who could see a photo of the device, including ones people had posted publicly on resale sites like eBay, had everything needed to log in. CISA's own advisory specifically warned owners to stop posting clear photos of the device's identifier sticker online, which tells you how little separated a curious stranger from full access. The tell is what a successful login exposes. Depending on the specific tracker model, an attacker gaining access could pull a vehicle's live location or, just like the Makaitis entry before it, disconnect power to the fuel pump remotely. The cost, as of the advisory, is that CinoTrack never responded to CISA's attempts to coordinate a fix, meaning the same guidance applies here as it did for Makaitis 3 years earlier. Change the default password immediately and hide the device's identifier from public view, because there's no patch coming to rely on instead. There's something almost surreal about the timeline here. The exact same category of flaw, hard-coded or default credentials, paired with remote vehicle control, was publicly documented by federal researchers in 2022. 3 years later, in 2025, a completely different manufacturer with millions more devices in the field shipped the identical mistake. This next one might be the one you least expect, because it's not hiding in a piece of cheap hardware at all. It's sitting on your phone, marketed as the responsible choice for keeping your family safe. Number 2, Life 360, one of the most widely used family location sharing apps in the country, with tens of millions of users trusting it specifically to keep tabs on kids, teenage drivers, and aging parents. The bait is the pitch itself. Not a gadget, not hardware, just an app marketed entirely around peace of mind, presented as the responsible modern parent's answer to, "Where is everyone right now?" Here's the mechanic. For years, Life 360 was reportedly one of the largest sources of raw consumer location data feeding the data brokerage industry, funneling information to companies that resell it. In January 2025, the Federal Trade Commission issued a formal order requiring Life 360 to stop selling users' sensitive location data, a direct regulatory finding that the practice was harming consumers. A separate Texas Attorney General lawsuit further alleges that driving data collected through apps, including Life 360, was funneled to an insurance-linked data broker and used to help build risk profiles on drivers, potentially affecting their insurance rates without their knowledge. The tell is who Life 360's own users turned out to be. One of the underlying legal actions filed under the initials ES was brought specifically over the sale of a minor's geolocation data, collected through an app installed by that child's own parents, trusting it to do the opposite of what the lawsuit alleges actually happened. The cost compounds from there. Beyond the data sales themselves, Life 360 confirmed a March 2000-2004 data breach that exposed personal information tied to more than 440,000 accounts, adding a second separate way this exact app put its own users at risk. Two entirely different failure modes, from the same company, both centered on the same sensitive category of information families trusted it to protect rather than expose. Think about the actual chain of trust here for a second. A parent installs an app specifically because they don't trust the world enough to let their kid go unmonitored. That same app, according to federal regulators, spent years selling the very location data that parent trusted it to protect, including, according to one plaintiff's case, without any real understanding from the family involved. And now, the one I've saved for last because it's owned by the exact same company you just heard about, and it makes a considerably worse promise to break. Taking the number one spot, Tile, the small Bluetooth tracking tag you clip to keys, wallets, or bags, acquired by Life 360 back in 2021, folding it directly into the same company from the entry before this one. The bait is convenience, with a security promise built right into the name of one of its own features. Tile includes something called anti-theft mode, marketed specifically as a way to protect the tracker from being spotted and removed by a thief. Here's the mechanic, and here's exactly where that marketed feature turns into the opposite of what it promises. A federal lawsuit, Ireland Gordy versus Tile, alleges that anti-theft mode makes a Tile invisible to the very scanning apps someone would normally use to detect an unknown tracker following them. A feature built to stop a thief from finding the device on their own car turns out to work exactly as well at stopping a stalking victim from finding it on theirs. The tell is the real case sitting inside that lawsuit. One of the plaintiffs found a Tile hidden in her own car, and when investigators reviewed the tracking history tied to that device, it had been used to monitor her location more than 16,000 separate times. Not once. Not a handful of alerts. 16,000 logged location pings, quietly building a complete picture of everywhere she went for as long as it went undetected. The cost is the specific comparison the lawsuit itself draws. Plaintiffs argue Tile's design lacks the anti-stalking protections built into competing trackers like Apple's AirTag, which actively alert nearby phones when an unfamiliar tracker appears to be traveling with someone. In August 2025, a federal court allowed the core negligence and privacy claims in this case to survive, though it dismissed some other claims as time-barred and sent part of the case to arbitration, meaning some of this may get resolved privately rather than in open court, but the central allegations are still alive. This one earns the top spot because of exactly what it reveals once you connect it to the entry right before it. The same company that a federal regulator ordered to stop selling location data also owns a physical tracking device currently facing a lawsuit for enabling one specific victim to be tracked over 16,000 times without her knowledge. That's not two unrelated problems. That's one company, two products, and the same underlying failure to take location privacy seriously showing up twice. Let that pairing land for a second. One product built to tell a parent where their child is standing. Another product built to tell a thief they can't find their own tracker. Owned by the same company, sitting in the same app ecosystem, and both currently facing formal documented allegations that they failed the exact person they were supposed to protect. That's all five. Take a breath, because now we're flipping this completely. Here are the two we'd actually trust for this exact job. Here's the good news buried under everything you just heard. You don't need 5 different fixes for 5 different devices. You need 2 decisions, and the entire category of risk you just heard about goes away. Safe Choice 1, GeoBit. It's designed and engineered specifically for tracking children and seniors, Built by a US-based company without the default password design flaws, the eavesdropping vulnerability, or the data selling controversy tied to anything on this list. It's been independently rated among the top overall picks for personal safety tracking in 2026 by multiple caregiving-focused review outlets, precisely because it was built around this exact use case from the ground up instead of being a repurposed asset tracker with a cute case. Safe Choice 2, Apple's AirTag through the Find My network. This is the direct answer to the tile problem specifically. Apple built anti-stalking protection directly into the system. If an AirTag that isn't yours appears to be traveling with you, your phone gets an alert, specifically to prevent the exact scenario described in the tile lawsuit. One honest caveat worth saying clearly: an AirTag is a Bluetooth item finder, not a live cellular GPS tracker, so it's the right swap for the keys and bag use case, not a one-for-one replacement for a dedicated kid or senior tracker like Giobit. Use the right tool for the right job, and you sidestep both problems on this entire list at once. One more habit worth carrying forward regardless of which device you choose. If you ever buy any tracker that ships with a default password, change it the moment you open the box, and never assume it came that way means it's safe that way. As you just heard twice on this list, sometimes the manufacturer never planned on fixing it at all. That's 5 GPS trackers actively tied to federal cybersecurity advisories, independent security research, and real lawsuits with real victims, backed by CISA, the FTC, and Avast Threat Labs, and 2 devices we'd actually trust with the job these 5 were supposed to do in the first place. The scariest part of this story isn't the hacking itself. It's that every single device on this list was bought for the exact same reason: to feel safer. A worried parent, a fleet manager responsible for other people's safety, a family trying to keep track of each other. Nobody buys a tracker because they're careless. They buy it because they care. And that's exactly what makes this list worth knowing before you buy, not after. If this made you think twice about what's clipped to your kid's backpack or bolted under your dashboard, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me which of these 5 you own, or if you've already made the switch to something safer. Share this with any parent, caregiver, or fleet manager in your life who trusts one of these 5 with something that actually matters. Like and subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next, because these lawsuits and advisories are still actively moving, and I'll be right here breaking down what changes the moment it happens. Stay sharp, stay safe, and watch the other videos.